podcast, mind unlocked. With every episode we cast real talk, real tools, wisdom on the fly. Tune in, geek out, reach for the sky. FPK, Future Proof Knowledge Podcast.
Future Proof Knowledge Podcast, episode 44. I want to go and see the Night Owl band in concert because I love that song so much. I think we should organize that, definitely. But we are back for episode 44. We had no episode last week, and that was down to a mix-up that I will take full responsibility for. So everyone can point the finger at me and blame Alan. But we are back this week, and I'm delighted to be joined by two of my favorite people, Miss Olive Hickmott and Mr. J. Sean Mills. Olive, how have you been keeping over the last few weeks?
I'm doing all right, thank you very much. Yeah.
You're sitting in the middle of a storm at the moment.
Yes, in a physical storm at the moment. Black clouds, lightning all over the place, dogs barking, you name it. We're doing all that.
Not even a metaphorical storm, an actual real storm. And J. Sean, how have you been doing?
Oh, I've been busy bee. If you may notice, I have a new background behind me. I'm in a new house, so I've been moving the last few days and trying to work at the same time. So doing good. Happy to be settled in. A little disappointed about my sore back, but overall, we're good to go.
Yeah, we did have a conversation, and poor J. Sean did that whole thing of doing his back in. So you have our sympathies, J. Sean. Anyone who's had a challenge with their back will be able to empathize with you on this one because it's no fun at all. So hopefully you'll have a quick recovery. But you might get an opportunity, J. Sean, with your bad back to be bored, which is exactly what we are going to be talking about today. So one of the things that I suppose has repeatedly come up for me in my interactions with young people and other adults is the lack of boredom now in society. And not pointing any fingers or saying it's anybody's fault. Like a lot of people will obviously blame young people and go, it's their fault. And then other people will blame parents and go, well, it's your fault for not letting your kids be bored and blah, 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 blah. But we live in a society where we don't get bored. So we're going to talk about boredom today. And Olive, I hope you take this in the way it's meant, right? But obviously you're a couple of years older than myself and J. Sean. So just a couple. But I could imagine that if we were to go through the generations, you know, each generation got less bored and got less bored and got less bored and got less bored. So for you growing up, was boredom a thing? And what did you do in those moments where you did experience boredom?
Well, I actually can't remember much of my childhood because it's so long ago. But I was always surprised when the word boredom sort of arrived because I didn't know what it was. And it was like, what is this thing people are talking about, boredom? I have no logical connection with that. I actually looked up what the definition was. And according to the National Institute of Health, it's lack of interest, stimulation, repeated tasks, monotonous routine. That's the definition of boredom. And I thought, I've never done any of that. And so I don't actually know.
So talk to me about what you did instead of that.
Even as a child, I think I had my life pretty much filled. It certainly is filled now. It's probably more filled now than it was before. But if it wasn't filled, I never felt bad about it. Like boredom, kids come out with boredom now. It's like, this is a bad thing. Well, actually, giving your brain a break from time to time is not a bad thing. But being bored is normally associated with being not very happy about stuff. And so I'm not suggesting that people should be doing that. but giving their brain a break is not a bad idea.
Yeah, I like that. So giving the brain a break. And Jay Sean, so for you, growing up in the 80s, like that's when kids television kind of really came about. There was a real ramp up in advertising towards children. Like, do you remember experiencing boredom, and what did you do in those moments when you experienced that, if you did?
Um, because of my brain, and I'm always thinking about stuff, and I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, fantasize, I guess. So growing up, I don't ever really remember, I can't recall a time where I felt bored. I would often, if there was no TV to watch or I was tired of the toys, it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was, I would get bored, but just, sit back and stare into nothing, sit in the backyard, just staring. Often look like I was bored, but I have a very active imagination, so I can sit back for hours on end and just use my imagination and travel. I can be anywhere in the world. If I thought I was bored, if we're using that word, I like naps. And the reason why I like naps is I can think about something while I'm laying down before I go to sleep. And once I fall asleep, what I'm thinking about becomes a reality in my dreams. So I look forward to those moments where there was nothing to do, because for me, there was always something to do. Um, Travel, go see um, that, go to Africa and look at like the wildlife and stuff like that without ever leaving my home or leaving my seat. Just being able to visualize that stuff. So I've never been one to really fall into the traditional sense of boredom. And I find it hard to believe that kids these days can even fall into the into boredom with all the technology that's at their fingertips. I mean, going to any restaurant, going to any shopping center, and every kid has their phone in front of their face. So there's so much more to engage with. I think boredom um, is kind of a thing of the past, and now it's more of um, how do you divide your time throughout the day? What do you do when you put your phone down? And most of the time, by the time somebody puts their phone down, they're putting it down because they have something to do. So I think this technology has kind of filled that gap of boredom because it's something you can do in between responsibilities.
Yeah. So for me, like when I think back to childhood, and boredom, like I do remember turning around to my mum at some stage going, "Mum, I'm bored." And she gave me the stock response that parents give, which is, "Okay, well, you have two choices now. You can go and find something to do, or I can give you something to do. But the thing I'm going to give you to do is not going to be as fun or as interesting as what you might find to do for yourself." So I would then disappear off and find something to do. But it was more so in those wet gray Saturdays where, like, because I grew up in an estate where there was like tons of kids, so we were just out all the time. So those wet days where it was so wet you just weren't going outside. um I what I used to love to do was, so everyone kind of at this stage probably knows how much I love football or soccer. And I used to like draw the football kits of all the teams in the English First Division, which is now the Premier League. And I draw out their kits, and I'd have their home kit and their away kit, and I'd stick them all together on pieces. So, and then I'd have a competition where I'd have like scores from 0 to 10, and I'd go, right, well, this is Liverpool. They're playing at home, so I'll have their home kit, and then I'll be playing against Everton, and they'll be wearing their away kit, and then I'll pull out a score, and it'll be Liverpool 3, Everton 2, and then I'd create a whole league table, and I'd run this thing, and I just got so immersed in it. I could spend hours doing it, and I absolutely adored doing that. The only caveat I'd say with that is that being a Liverpool fan, it's amazing. Liverpool never lost any games. Like that, it was just crazy the way that would happen. They would win every game. So I might pull out an Everton 4, and the Everton 4 would go back into the pot until I pulled out Everton 1. So yeah, or Everton 2. So that was what I like to do. And like you're saying, Jay Sean, you know, doing that kind of going off into the world in my head if there was nothing on TV, because there was very little on TV at the time. So that's what I kind of love to do. But I do take what you're saying, Olive, about boredom being there's a negative connotation. But I think because we live in a society now where boredom it's almost impossible to be bored unless we choose to be bored. But I think now what might be called boredom could actually be called meditation. So you're actually, if you're putting down the devices, if you're putting down the book and just sitting and being and just allowing whatever thoughts to come, to me, that's meditation. But when I'm listening to you guys, that could be boredom too.
Yeah, but I would also go back to what Jay Sean was saying about using his imagination if he hadn't got anything actually to physically do. And I think that's one of the disasters of this day and age is that children, if they've got nothing to physically do, don't do what Jay Sean was doing, which was to use their imagination, do time travel, do all sorts of things. What they're doing is, well, what's the internet going to send me on my phone?
And that increases the levels of stress, the levels of anxiety, the levels of dopamine, which then I think causes people to have more extreme reactions to boredom. And I'm curious. I'd be curious to see if there's research into boredom and depression.
Yeah.
Which would be very interesting, I think, to see. So, Jay Sean, talk to me about then the impact of screens, because like we grew up not having screens essentially. Like screens are there now. So yes, there was TV when we were younger, but I don't know if it's the same for you in the US, but certainly for us, like there was very few shows aimed at kids except on a Saturday morning where there was kids TV, or in the afternoon where there was maybe an hour of kids TV. But outside of that, there just was nothing there. And most kids that I grew up with didn't enjoy the news, didn't enjoy current affairs programs. So they just didn't watch that much TV. Talk to me about the evolution of the screens that we now have and that our children now have, and the impact they have, both good and maybe negative.
Well, the evolution of screens from a macro level that kids don't understand is I used to have to get up from the couch to go change a channel or to go turn the volume up. Then there was a time where there was a wire that ran all the way from the TV that was about 10 feet long. So your couch had to be within 10 feet of the TV so you didn't have to get up, but you can use that. Now it's remote control. You can talk to your TV. I think the evolution of television, especially today for today's kids, it's not the same. When we were younger, we had TV, local network channels. Then cable came about, and that was still a little iffy. It was hard to find stuff. But these days, every household has a Netflix subscription or Amazon Prime Video subscription. So there's an abundance of programmings for individuals to watch now. So you can sit down and on regular TV, if there's not anything you want, you can hit a button and go directly to a show you want to watch, and you can rewatch it 100 times in one day if you want. I think it's a catch-22 as anything with technology. It's great that we have that much control over what we intake, but then it's also not not so great that we have that much control and of the information that we intake. I think what I enjoyed about 10 years ago, even 15 years ago, when it comes to technology and TV is you didn't have all the options to watch exactly what you wanted. You didn't have your Netflix and all these streaming apps. So you were forced, if you're watching TV during the day and you were a kid, there wasn't child programming, you were forced to go to the Science Channel, and at least that was something you can learn something from. So I think kids had a better, they were forced to view things they wouldn't necessarily be interested in because that's the only thing they had access to, which is kind of the reason why I learned so much about nature, because there wasn't cartoon shows on during the day, so I'd watch nature shows. And now I'm a nature enthusiast, and I see an animal or a bird, and I'm like, oh, that's that type of bird, or that's that type of animal. Not because I was ever interested in learning that, just I had nothing else to watch, so that's what I watched. So yeah, I think the evolution is good. It's nice that we could watch what we want, but I think that's where, as parents, we need to also monitor the usage and the programming that our children watch, and let them know, when if you're sitting around and you want to put your phone down, or you should put your phone down and watch a show, watch something educational, watch something that you could benefit from. Just watching cartoons and these sitcoms, it's making kids brain dead. You don't get that. You lose your imagination, I guess, when you're just being spoon fed everything you want. Which just ties into like politics and stuff. Once you start spoon feeding just your likes and you're not getting a diverse amount of content, you can fall into a trap where you just believe one route, and the way algorithms are, they're just going to reinforce that thinking no matter what, because those are your likes. So I don't know, it's a tricky combination of technology. You ask your phone a question, all of a sudden you start getting 100 marketing messages around that point. So I think TV's good. The evolution of it has been good. It's just, as parents, we need to better monitor it and encourage our children or younger adults to explore more outside of their interest.
Yeah. And Olive, like, what do you think are the benefits as well? So Jay Sean's kind of touched on it there. So I'm curious for you, what do you think the benefits are
What
of screens on being able to explore your interests 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? So what's good about that?
I think I was listening to a woman the other day talking about AI, and she said, I can't remember exactly what she said, but there was something along the lines of, it can actually teach you to have much better questions. And I really quite like that. And I went, yeah, that's, now but you need somebody to help you frame that, to understand that, of asking better questions. And asking better questions is vital. So if it can help you do that, because, even ChatGPT will go, if you ask it a question, it will then say at the bottom, it will say, would you like this? Would you like some more information on whatever it is? Which is a much more interactive way of doing it. What I don't like is the monotonous stuff that comes at you all day long, every day, and our kids get sucked into it, and they don't have time. We'll go back to saying bored again. They don't have time to use their imagination and move out of the box. But then I could also say about that is that we have extremely visual children when they arrive on the planet, and we are not doing anywhere near enough to encourage them to further develop that imagination. I mean, the lucky ones, like Jay Sean worked it out on his own probably, but lots of children don't, and they fall into the technology trap, which is continuously feeding them information, which is not helping them use their imaginations and ask
Yeah.
better questions.
Yeah, and I do think that that's the thing. One of the challenges is that we definitely have a far more, we'll say, intelligent. Now, I know there's way more than one intelligence, but we'll say, what would be classically seen as an intelligent world. So children are a lot more tuned into their mental health, to being able to name their experiences and understanding complex theories much younger. And like, I spend my life talking to young people, and even the vocabulary that young people use is a lot more intelligent, again in inverted commas, which is great. But like Olive said, we're losing the freedom of and the exploration of visual thinking and coming up with things for ourselves. And I think that's why, and Olive, you'll definitely, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you'll definitely agree with this, but that's why we talk about 21st century skills being those elements that the neurodiverse community can bring, because they innately have that. And although the systems try to tell them that that's not the way it should be, those are the people who are winning Young Scientist awards, and those are the people who are, leaving school early and creating these inventions that no one would ever think about or would ever think possible, because they are able to tap into that side of their brain. So, like, I think we've got massive opportunities as we move deeper into the 21st century to try and facilitate those young people, and not try and tell, say, and I know we don't use the term, but not try and tell those neurotypical people that they can't do this, because, like you said, Olive, they all can. Like, that's the thing. Like, they all can do that. So how do we encourage that, Olive?
I think it starts with the sorry, that's my 18-month-old screaming in the background.
That's okay.
I think we encourage them. I mean, I was watching him today, his grandson, and his face, he was watching. I just put on something on my phone for just 30 seconds, which was the wheels on the bus go round and round. And he was absolutely spellbound by this. He was taking it all in. You could see he was absolutely glued to it. And he was a bit like the dog, head on one side, head on the other side, trying to work it out. Just keep doing, not necessarily showing them videos, but keep doing things that's going to encourage them to keep using their visual skills and keep creating using their imagination. And reading them stories. I mean, that's another great way, reading them stories. And then asking them to replay their stories. What you've just read them a story. Ask them to talk about it. Ask them to what it meant to them, whether they could replay it, whether they could change the ending. All those sort of questions that will actually help them, encourage them to find that their imagination is really valuable.
I used to love asking my kids. So I'd start making up a story if we weren't reading a particular story, and I'd ask them to come up with the next line. And then I'd come up with the next line after that. And then I'd ask them to come up with the next line. And I really, really enjoyed it, and they really enjoyed it. But then I started doing that with like babies and toddlers who couldn't speak. And like the people around me would kind of look at me and kind of laugh. So a toddler would go goo 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 gaga, and I go, really? And what happened
Oh, yeah,
next?
exactly.
What happened next? And then they'd go ba gaga ba gaga. You're kidding me. And what did you say to them then? Oh, really? That's absolutely amazing. Well done for saying that. And like that is just the engagement was the yeah, you're saying something and it's important. Yeah, you're saying something and it's got power and I'm invested and engaged in it. And I think that is one of the big things for me. Like even when I look at parents, and this is not trying to be critical, but when I look at parents pushing buggies and they are talking on the phone or they're looking on the phone while they're pushing their buggy. Okay, if your kid's asleep, grand. But if your kid's wide awake, put the phone away. Engage with your child. You
Yeah.
know, have those conversations. Point out, leaves, flowers, car, gate, that kind of thing. Like I was walking past one, there was these two ladies and a little girl. And so my dog is quite big. And whenever we walk past kids, like he just looks like a horse to them because he's so big. Right. And we walked past, this kid was probably about maybe 3. And she was like, Mommy, look, the big dog. Mommy, look at the big dog. Mommy, look at the big dog. As we were walking past. And the mum and the other lady just kept talking. And she's like, Mommy, look at the big dog. Mommy, look at the big dog. And like the, the parent was just totally disengaged. And I'm like, that is an important connection moment, not teaching moment, but just connection moment where you're actually listening to your child and showing them that they deserve to be listened to, that they've got something important to say. Now, I'm not saying you have to do it all the time, but those are those moments that help to teach children, learn about themselves, learn about the world around them, and how that they can interact. And like I carried the thought further. I went, I could imagine. Eventually, what happened was the mum said, "Stop," because the child's like levels got louder. And the mum went, "Don't shout at me." So that child then gets in trouble. But if we take the step back, the child tried to address the mum probably 10 times in a nice, calm fashion.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the voice got raised, and like children, adults are no different. We are more likely to respond to negative attention rather than no attention. So those
A
moments are
huge
really
missed
important.
opportunity there.
Absolutely. Massive
Could have been
missed.
like, I see the big dog. Do you know what kind of big dog that is? That's a Labrador Retriever. And
What
keep on
colors?
pushing. Yeah,
You
colors.
know,
Yeah.
everything. And that starts a full scale conversation. So again, I'm not being critical of that parent. I probably am, but I'm not
Yes,
being
we are. Bad parent. Bad parent.
but I just think those are really important interactions. And I want to, Jason, I want to come to you now and kind of take it like go to the opposite end of this, the extreme. For those parents who fill their children's days full of school and activities, and then the weekend comes and it's activity and visiting and activity and doing and doing and doing. So our children never learn to switch off. What's your take on those parents who kind of pack their children's lives to the rafters?
I think that's what helicopter parenting, where you just kind of hover all the time and you're controlling every aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, with the neurodiverse, with my son, 13 years old, nonverbal autism, has some speech, has emotional breakdowns. Um, in that scenario, I can see the benefit in hovering, but then also you have to step back and allow them to do things on their own. I understand he's in school and he's getting ABA therapy and he has a full week with intensive attention from therapists and teachers and everybody. So on the weekend, I I don't plan a lot. It's kind of let him do what he wants. I know certain places in town he'll like to go, so maybe go do one of those. But as far as structure, um, there has to be a time to bring down the structure. Otherwise, what happens, and I had lots of friends like this, through the early years, through junior high, parents are hovering, through high school, and it just turns into where they have no social. They're always doing something. They always have something planned. They're doing elective classes, sports, because their parents want them to do all this stuff. And then the weekend comes and, oh, we got to go for this event. We got this, we got that. And I've seen so many friends get burned out. And it was actually counterproductive because it made them not want to go on to college. They were just tired of it. They were tired of all the instruction, all the structured weekends and everything. So it just took away that, it kind of took away their imagination, their playfulness, they actually have become their parents. Their parents turn them into themselves. And everything they do at that point is going to be based off from what their parents do. And it's just, you're not letting them build their own identity. I mean, I've even seen parents try to control what their children listen to, types of music. Got to let them explore, let them build their own identities just because you don't necessarily care for it. And even when it comes to speech, like I've always said, I don't care what words my son says. If he drops an F-bomb, I'm super excited because that's speech. It's something he said. I'm not mad. I don't care what context it's in. Any word is a good word. So there's a lot of negative I see when you're overly engaged in your child's life. You got to be there to guide them in the right direction to make good decisions, but you also have to let them find their own path. You have to let them fall. You have to let them run into that boredom wall if that's what it takes. Otherwise, they don't learn. They become codependent. And a codependent adult is a pain in the ass.
Yeah, and I think it is like what you're essentially talking about there is allowing children have unstructured time.
Yeah.
Because, and like I'll hold my hand up. I slipped into it. So when my eldest daughter was probably maybe 8 or 9, maybe, she was doing like football, she was doing like art, dance, music, like she was doing activities all the time. And we actually ended up going to that extreme where there was literally something on every single evening for us to realize, oh my God, this is like overwhelming for us. Never mind my daughter. So we kind of pulled it back. And it's not that parents are necessarily doing it from a bad place. You want your children to experience different things. Well, want them to try and find those things that they might like. But the problem comes when it's us deciding what it is that they should try out. Now, I've also come across many parents who go, Alan, I have a kid who wants to do everything, like literally wants to do everything, and we just can't do everything. And that's teaching your child about life. That you can't do everything, you can't have everything, and that there are times where you need to just not. And that having that unstructured time then allows young people the opportunity to become creative, to use their imagination, to go and discover something new. I remember saying to my daughter, look what my mum said to me, go and find something to do, because she said she was bored. And she disappeared for an hour. And I kind of said to my wife, have you seen her? And she's like, no, I haven't seen her. So I went looking for her and she was drawing. And now that has become one of her go-to things that she does to help her decompress when she gets home from university or whatever. She'll just sit and doodle and draw, and she's a fantastic artist. And it's not a fantastic artist to become an artist, to sell her wares. It's just to give her a technique that allows her to decompress. So we need to start to teach to allow our children to discover how they decompress, because we might be different to them. Olive, I'd love to get your take on the decompression, but also this goes back to a bit of a brief conversation you and I had before the pod went live, where you're always a parent. So how do we manage that, not stepping in to try and keep and be helpful to our child and give them the space to, as Jason says, fall down and lift themselves back up? Not always easy.
No, and I'll just take you back a bit. When they're in school, then most of the time they're trying to get the right answers. That's what school is about, in my view. You know, you're teaching them some stuff and you're expecting them to learn stuff. Unstructured time really doesn't appear in school, in my opinion. And I think it's so important to enable them to have time when they can just think. I'll give you the example, which I may have put on a previous podcast, is that I've got a 5-year-old granddaughter. And when she first went to school, I was picking her up 1 or 2 days a week. And it was the autumn, you know, that started the school. And we were kicking the leaves along on the pavement every time we walk back from school. Oh, walking, that's another important point. Walking from school rather than being in a buggy or being in a car where you're not communicating with the person that's going with you. So anyway, and then she would ask me whether we could go to the park, and that was great. And then she would start using her imagination and coming out with these comments, which start off with, which is, Bella, which is what she calls me, Bella, do you know? And we had things like, Bella, do you know, we at night time, there's somebody comes along and puts a ladder up the tree and takes the leaves back on the tree and sticks them back on again. And you always know that when she says something like, Bella, do you know, is that this is coming straight out of her imagination. So you don't argue, you go along with it. You go, oh, that's interesting. You know, how many leaves are they managing to get back on again? And then we had the trees that you pick the trees, they pick the trees up at night, shove the leaves underneath and then put them back down again. And so, you know, and all these statements were precursors were, Bella, do you know? And I absolutely loved it because none of it was real, and she knew none of it was real. That's why she sort of had this introductory sentence. And I think walking home with your kids, I know you can't always do that because you're not located near enough, but if the possibility is walking home with your kids, you can learn so much during that period, and that definitely decompresses them. And the more unstructured time we can give them, I think the better they are, and the more free thinkers they are.
I think you mentioned something very important there. It's decompression time for them. Because like you said, they've probably spent the whole school day, even at 5 years of age, trying to get the right question, the right answer, or because that's what gets rewarded. So being able to use your imagination and come up with something completely like made up.
Yeah.
Like, and I think sometimes parents worry, like, you know, but what about their future development? I'm going to say there is a 99.999% chance that your children are not going to get to 25 and think that somebody comes along at night and lifts the tree up and brushes the leaves underneath. If they do, they're probably taking some psychedelic drugs. So they're not going to turn into adults. And like, parents worry so much. And again, this is actually being empathetic towards parents, but they worry so much about everything that their child experiences that they then get gripped with worries that the child is not worried about at all, that become completely overblown.
Yeah.
But our children pick up on those tensions, pick up on those worries, and then they go, oh, should I be worried about something?
And I think the free conversation with a really young child is absolutely brilliant. You know, you can't understand a word they're saying, but you act as if you do, and they act as if you have understood it.
Yeah.
And that can't happen early enough, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But parents, I mean, I've got a little one here at the moment, and parents are much more being adults than, whereas I will tend to be sitting on the floor with a pullover over my head or something. You know, it's just I don't have to think of what should we be doing now. I just do whatever seems like a good idea at the time.
And in fairness, you have the freedom to do that as granny. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? But parents can make time for that too. And it
yeah.
might, even if it's only 10 minutes. Jason, I want to ask you about burnout though. Like if we have constant stimulation the whole time, whether that's as adults or as children, we can hit burnout. Have you experienced that as a parent or as a young person where you just get so overwhelmed by the amount of things that are in front of you that your brain just shuts down?
Oh yeah, yeah, quite often. So yeah, burnout is real. Um, I I ha hmm. As a kid, I can remember plenty of times where I was in sports. Plus I had to do school, plus I had a job, and you just run into a point where yeah, you're burned out. You don't want to do anything. As a parent, though, one of the things that I have to constantly correct myself on is when I get burned out as an adult. Oftentimes, um, it switches me to try to live vicariously through my son. So then I start trying to get him to do stuff so I can switch away from responsibility to what fun is he having? How can I attach myself to that? Um, I don't know, I think for adults, especially parents of children with neurodiverse kids, you're in a constant state of burnout. But you just have to prioritize. And understand that you can't do it all. And sometimes you just have to let things slide through the cracks and make a note to come back to it. Um, I think the biggest problem parents face is they know they have responsibilities. If they can't handle all the responsibilities, they put that weight on themselves as if they're not good enough or they're not capable of doing it. When in actuality, it's something that everyone faces, and it's just how do you compartmentalize
Hmm.
the different aspects of your responsibilities. Um, if you're a adult, single, no kids, I don't want to hear about it. You have no excuse. Otherwise, I mean, this is something we're stuck with. We have to figure out.
Yeah, and I think that's it. There is no escape pod where you can go and climb into it to just escape real world. I know, like when when I was a kid, a lot of the dads would escape to the pub and go
Yep.
and go for a few pints in the evening and leave the poor mums having to deal with all the kids. But
But even that
thankfully,
doesn't work out because they show up at work the next day. The first half half of their day at work is like, I spent too much time at the pub.
yeah,
So it's all counterintuitive.
yeah, it just doesn't work. Um, so Olive, is there, so we've spoken about unstructured time and imagination and having those conversations walking to school and back from school, or just, going for a walk where you're looking at the leaves on the tree, or, being creative, getting your kids finishing stories. Is there other ways that you can think of to encourage your child's imagination in a positive way?
Oh, for example, I would have them. The first thing I'd do, and this is for teachers actually, as well as parents, is to have them when they're sitting on the carpet. listening to a story, I get them to go. First thing is, whilst you're listening to the story, make up pictures in your head. And when you've done that, and when we've got to the end of the story, I'm going to ask you about your pictures. And none of your pictures have to be the same. And so and get them to work in twos or something, and get them to tell each other their stories, and get them to remember that none of them have to be perfect from what I said in the first place, and see how they get on with that. And then you could ask them to, if they're really enjoying that, you could ask them to change the ending of the story and see what they could do with that. And so all of those things, without them using the word imagination, are using their imagination.
Yeah, I love that. Jay Sean, have you any that you could recommend?
For using imagination?
Yeah.
For kids?
Hmm.
I would recommend every parent sign up for FPK University and use our imagination. We have a game in there. It's for imagination. It's great for kids. Tools like that are really fun. You can sit them down. You can let them imagine a pink elephant, and they go through the whole script. And at the end, it'll give you an image of what you imagined. I think things like that are really fun. I think with imagination, getting your children to create things. One thing that I used to like doing that I got to use my imagination for is Lincoln Logs. I wasn't a big Lego fan, but the Lincoln Logs they look like logs that you would use to build a log home. They got the notches so they can stack. And using my imagination, no instructions, just throw all the blocks on the ground and build something. Imagine the fishing cabin I want to have when I get old, or I think just putting things out there, that Legos, erector sets, build your own robot type things, getting into the STEM type toys and tools, I think are probably the best. And what happens is we get these things for our kids, but we end up being the ones who play with it the most because they are fun. And when your kids see you start having fun, then they get more interested in it. So then it also builds that bond to where you both work on something together. But I think dumping it in their laps first and letting them have free reign is a great way to jumpstart a person's imagination. I mean, it can be a bunch of paints and a easel. Imagine something. Giving them a starting prompt though to start with, like finding out, so what would you like to do this weekend if it's on a Saturday morning? What would you like to do? Yeah, go paint me something that shows what it is you want to do this weekend. And if I can understand what your painting is, we'll go do that. Gives them a chance to earn something by doing something fun. So I think it's just our jobs to be creative.
Yeah, I have a relation he's only young. He's still a boy, but he loves creating stories with Lego, and does kind of like stop motion with his Lego. But like he spends time planning out like who the characters are, draws it out like what are they going to do and what's the background going to be like, and then he builds it up. So it's not like it's like Lego is fantastic, but if you just do Lego just to build the thing that you're building, that again, there's mechanical learning in that, but it's not imagination where it's like, do what the bloody hell you want. But he just kind of plans on it, and I love his little videos. They are so inventive and so imaginative. And again, he doesn't need to upload it to YouTube to start monetizing it. It's just using the imagination. So it's not always, there doesn't always have to be an end goal for this process. Just using our imagination is where the beauty comes in. Olive, we're going to wrap it up, come to a wrap up. Have you any final thoughts on boredom and what parents can do to help their children experience the term we'll use as boredom, and what might come out of that?
Well, the first thing to do is notice if your kid says they're bored. And if they've owned up to it, do what Alan said earlier. There's several, pick up on it instead of saying, I mean, the obvious thing a parent might say is, don't be ridiculous, you can't be bored, go and do, but giving them an open-ended opportunity to do something with their free time. And I mean, most of the time, I'll go back to my definition, is monotonous routine. Most of the time, it's not monotonous routine. Well, unless you think, scrolling through a phone is probably monotonous routine. But it's like, it's most of the time, I think also, ask them to describe boredom. I'd like to know what theirs is.
That's
and
a question.
What do you do with it? So you can have a whole conversation about what it is. And it's, again, there's no right answers, because if a parent turns around and says you can't be bored, they've got the wrong answer. That's closed down the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You go, well, what would you like to do with it? How did you get into it? How would you like to get out of it? That's a few questions for you.
Is there anything wrong with it?
Yes. Are you enjoying it?
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Olive. Jason, have you any kind of wrap-up thoughts before we kind of come to a close?
It's kind of leaning to what Olive said. I mean, yeah, you need to know if they're bored. If a kid came to me and said, I'm bored, that tells me that they just don't know what they want to do. So then the line of questioning comes in. Well, what are you interested in doing? And once you find out what they're interested in, it's real easy to direct them into something not being bored. Or from a very early stage, every time they say I'm bored, immediately give them a task. All right, take out the trash. Eventually, they're going to stop coming to you saying I'm bored, and they're going to find something to do to fill that time of boredom. That, I think, is probably the strongest move. Not even giving them an option when they come and say, hey, Dad, I'm bored. Okay, take out the trash, sweep the driveway. Let me know if you're still bored when you're done. It's amazing. They do that a couple times. They don't ask. They just start looking for something to do. And if the child's on point, they may know what you would ask them. So they may just go sweep the drive the next time that they think they're bored, because they know that's what would be the request.
Brilliant. Well,
I love it.
Folks, we hope you've enjoyed this one. I love talking about boredom, and because actually we're talking about creativity and supporting your children to be creative. So that's it for this week. We will be back next week with episode 45 of the Future Proof Knowledge podcast. Until then, look after yourselves.
FPK, Future Proof Knowledge Podcast. Mind unlocked. With every episode we cast real talk, real tools, wisdom on the fly. Tune in, geek out, reach for the sky. FPK, Future Proof.